What I'm going to do in this video is give you my first impressions of Judges chapter 17. I have it printed out here. And the reason I'm doing this is because I have to write an essay for Bible college on the book of Judges. And I asked my lecturer for permission to write it specifically on the last few chapters of Judges. Chapters 17, 18, 19, 21. Couple of reasons why I asked for this permission. Firstly, I don't think I've ever heard a sermon series on this. On the last few chapters of Judges. I've heard many on Samson, on Deborah, on the other judges, but not on these chapters. And I think the reason is because of number two. Number two, these are kind of like challenging chapters to read. They're kind of depressing. Some bits are very, very violent. You might want to be very careful about letting kids read these chapters. But having said that, they're in the Bible. So why not try to read them, try to treat them as God's word, and pray for God's help to understand what He's saying to us through these challenging chapters. So here's my first impressions of Judges chapter 17. Now a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim, he said to his mother, "The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and about which I heard you utter a curse, I have that silver with me, I took it." Then his mother said, "The Lord bless you, my son." Okay, so he confesses to having stolen his mom's money, 1,100 shekels of silver. And as a result, the mom says, "God bless you." God bless you. Maybe in appreciation for him, confessing his sin. But maybe also because she uttered a curse, curse you, curse that person. But that person is my son, so I better bless you instead. Kind of weird. But it gets weirder. It gets weirder as we read on. Verse 3. When he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother, she said, "I solemnly consecrate my silver to the Lord for my son to make an image overlaid with silver. I will give it back to you." She prays to God. She makes this vow before God. Verse 4, so after he returned the silver to his mother, she took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to a silversmith who used them to make the idol, and it was put in Micah's house. So many questions, so many. Why 200 only? She said, "I'm going to use this money to make this idol," but she only used 200. Like, got discount, or maybe she didn't want to actually use all of it. So this idol is kind of like a cheap replica, if you like. So that's one thing, why only 200? But also, why an idol? I mean, it's kind of weird, right? Because, maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but God really hates this kind of thing. The first commandment number 1 of the 10 commandments, God says, don't do this. Don't make idols. Don't make any image of God. And yet that's what she does, but in God's name. So lots of questions about their actions, their kind of worship before God. But let's read on as well. Verse 5. Now this man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and some household gods, and installed one of his sons as his priest. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. So what he does with this idol of God that his mom made for him, he puts it in a shrine with other gods. So he kind of like has a buffet of gods. He worships many gods, not just, the God of the Bible. And, I guess that happens, in these days you think of Chinese household gods, they have the altar, and it's rarely ever one god, there are many figurines. But this is kind of like treating this God the same as all the rest. Jesus is just one of many, many gods. So that's one thing. But also he installs his son as a priest. So it says, "Hey, Achaya, you now become reverend, you now become pastor." And so essentially what you see here is he's creating his own religion. It's not just that he's worshipping many religions, but he's creating his own ecosystem of gods as well as worship and priests even. He installs his own son as like a reverend. And the reason for this, according to Judges, is verse 6. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did whatever they wanted as they saw fit. And it's kind of like saying it's free for all. But it's interesting the reason why. It says because there's no king. There's no political figure. There's no political authority over the land. And therefore, the result of this is a kind of free for all, but in a religious sense. He ends up worshipping any god. And you wonder, what's the connection between politics and religion? Well, Judges seems to say that there is a connection. Let's carry on, verse 7. A young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, who had been living within the clan of Judah, left that town in search of some other place to stay. On his way, he came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. Micah asked him, "Where are you from?" "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah," he said, "and I'm looking for a place to stay." Then Micah said to him, "Live with me and be my father and priest." So not just, hey, you're looking for a place to stay, go and tumpang my place. But no. Stay with me and become my priest. And he says, "And I'll give you 10 shekels of silver a year, your clothes and your food." So it's kind of like employing him as this priest. So, verse 11, the Levite agreed to live with him, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. You wonder what happened to the other son? Who was a priest? Did he fire him or something? But now this Levite, a Levite is someone who is traditionally a priest in the house of God, but now he is a priest in the house of Micah. It says there, Micah treats him like one of his sons. Except that Micah said, "Be a father to me." But actually he treats him like one of his sons. And there's no mention of Micah's father. Maybe he's looking for like a father figure. But he's looking for a father figure that he can control as a subordinate. He's paying for his food, for his lodging. And this might be kind of like a mirror of how he's looking for a kind of like a god that he can control. He can treat like an idol. He can place it into his shrine. So you want that authority, you want that kind of like figure in your life, but you don't want to be under control of that figure. Verse 12, then Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in his house. And Micah said, "Now I know the Lord will be good to me, since this Levite has become my priest." And just moving on to chapter 18, in those days Israel had no king. So again, it kind of like explains this kind of thinking, this kind of weirdness, and the fact that there is no king in the land. And very strange, verse 13, Micah says, "Now I know the Lord will be good to me. Now I know God will bless me because I've done all these weird things." So I don't know. What do you get from this? I mean, you just see a lot of weird things. Are we supposed to condemn this behavior? I think maybe yes, but it's interesting that Judges just tells the story. It doesn't give any judgment on it. It lets the weirdness speak for itself. But again, the weirdness is specific. It's in the religious domain. It's almost like saying when we don't have the true worship of God, we end up creating alternative forms of worship in the name of God. So it's not just that we abandon God, but we kind of like superimpose that true God onto other kinds of false gods through false worship. And then we become gods because we are the ones who create the system. We are the ones who are in charge over the priests. We pay them, and we made the shrine, and we created this idol. So in the end, we want to worship something, but we don't really want to worship God or something like that. Yeah. But really interesting, right? Really interesting chapter. Really interesting kind of like situation that you see here in this guy named Micah. Yeah. That's just my first impressions of this chapter. I will give you more as I read on in chapters 18, 19, and 21. So thanks for joining me. This has been my first impressions of Judges chapter 17.